As the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the African horizon with hues of red and gold, the old man sat beneath the great Mugumo tree, the sacred tree of his people. His skin was weathered, his hands like the gnarled roots of the ancient trees that had witnessed many seasons. His grandchildren gathered around him, their faces expectant, eyes wide with curiosity. Before the world changed, before the strangers came with their iron and their strange ways, we lived in harmony with the land, Mzee Wainaina began, his voice carrying a quiet strength. We understood the rhythm of the earth, how it breathed with us, how it fed us. The days were simple, and the nights filled with stories that bound us to the ancestors. Our land was our home, and we were part of its song. Mzee's eyes closed for a moment, and he let the memories flood him. He remembered when the sun rose over the hills, casting long shadows over the fields of millet and maize. The children, barefoot and free, would run to the river to fetch water, their laughter ringing through the air like music. The elders would meet under the Mugumo tree, where stories of the ancestors were passed down through generations. Do you know, Mzee continued, that every tree, every river, every rock had a spirit? We spoke to them, and they spoke back in whispers of wind and rustling leaves. The land was our teacher, and we were her children. Our names, our songs, our dances, they were all written in the soil. The cows, Mzee continued, were the heart of our lives. Our ancestors believed that cattle were gifts from Nai, the Creator. They were not just livestock, but companions, living beings whose spirits connected us to the earth. When a child was born, the first gift they received was a cow. It wasn't just an animal, it was a symbol of life, of abundance, of continuity. Mzee's eyes grew distant, remembering the days when cattle roamed freely across the land. We didn't need money, for the cows provided all we needed. When a family gathered to celebrate a birth or a wedding, it was the cows that danced first. Their bells jingled like a chorus of voices, welcoming the new life. The fire was our guide, Mzee said, his voice growing softer. It was always there, burning brightly at the center of the homestead. It was where we gathered in the evenings to share stories, to cook food, and to keep the darkness away. The fire was a symbol of warmth, of life, and of our ancestors' presence. He paused, staring into the distance where the last light of the sun flickered like a dying ember. We didn't have electricity, no flashing lights. But the fire, oh the fire, it was enough. Its warmth carried the stories of the past, and its glow reminded us of where we came from. Mzee leaned forward, his voice taking on a serious tone. When a child was born, we didn't just give them a name. No, we named them after ancestors who had passed on. The elders would gather under the Mugumo tree, and a ritual would begin. We would say the child's name aloud, and the wind would carry it through the branches, through the hills, and into the spirits of those who had gone before. He smiled softly, remembering the ceremony that had been held for his own birth. Our names were not just words. They were prayers, they were blessings. They tied us to the land, to the ancestors, and to each other. The air grew cooler as the evening wore on, and the children huddled closer to Mzee. He paused, his gaze darkening as he shifted to the next chapter of his tale. Then came the first strangers, he said, his voice quieter now, filled with sorrow. They came from the coast, with pale skin and strange clothing. At first, we thought they were just travelers, seeking salt or trade. But they were not like the traders we knew. They spoke a language that none of us understood, and they brought with them things we had never seen. Metal tools, weapons that made thunder, and strange goods that glittered like stars. The children remained silent, hanging on every word. They came, not for trade, but for land. They spoke of ownership, of boundaries. Our elders were puzzled. The land cannot be owned, they said. It belongs to no one and everyone. But the strangers did not understand. They wanted to claim it, to measure it, to put a price on it. And so, slowly, the world began to change. Mzee paused again, his eyes narrowing as he recalled the first gifts the strangers brought. They gave us knives, sharp like the teeth of a lion. At first, we were fascinated. These tools were strong, unlike our stone knives, and they made cutting through the jungle easier. We accepted their gifts, but we did not understand the cost. His hand trembled slightly as he spoke of the gifts. We soon realized that these gifts were not free. They came with promises of prosperity and protection, but also with expectations to obey, to trade in ways we never had before. And when we accepted their gifts, we gave them something precious in return, our way of life. Mzee Wainaina's voice grew heavy with the weight of memory. The first strangers did not come with force, but with words. They spoke of land and ownership, of laws and rules. They told us that the land we had lived on for generations was no longer ours. No, it belonged to their queen, they said. And with their books and pens, they marked the earth with lines that had never been there before. His eyes flickered with a mix of sorrow and confusion. At first, we did not understand. We thought these men were just passing through, that they would leave, as all strangers eventually did. But they did not. Instead, they brought more men, more soldiers, and with them came the iron rails and roads that cut through our lands like scars. The iron roads were the first sign of the change to come, Mzee said, shaking his head slowly. We watched as they laid the tracks through the fields, through the forests, across the rivers. These roads, the trenny they called them, were strong and fast. But they were not meant for us. They were meant to connect the strangers to each other, not to us. He paused, looking out at the setting sun. We had no need for such roads. We knew the paths of the hills, the trails of the rivers, the way the land whispered to us. But the strangers, they wanted to control us. They told us that their iron roads would bring progress, that it would make things easier. But we soon learned that these roads led not to freedom, but to chains. As Mzee spoke, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees. At first, we accepted the changes. We believed that the strangers did not mean harm. But soon, we saw things we could not ignore. They started to take more than just land. They began to take the cows, the cattle that had been our wealth and our life. He leaned forward, his voice growing more urgent. We protested, of course. We gathered in the villages, in the open fields, and we raised our voices against them. We told them that the land was not theirs to take, that the cows were not theirs to count. But the soldiers came with their guns, and their eyes were hard. They told us to be silent, to obey, and to remember our place. The strangest thing they did, child, was build schools in the villages, Mzee continued. They brought in teachers from far away, and they told the children to come, to learn the ways of the strangers. They said it was for their own good, that they would be enlightened. Mzee's eyes darkened as he recalled the day his own children were taken to the school. The children who went to those schools returned different. They no longer sang the songs of our ancestors. They no longer knew the names of the trees, or the stories of the hills. They spoke in strange tongues, and their eyes held a distant look, as though they no longer belonged to our land. The strangers did not just bring iron and books, they brought their gods too, Mzee said, his voice filled with sadness. They told us that the gods we worshipped, the spirits of the land, the ancestors who guided us, were not real. They said there was only one God, the one who lived in the sky, far above us. He sighed deeply, his heart heavy with the memories. Some of our people accepted this new God. They built churches and began to pray in a foreign tongue. But others, those who still remembered the old ways, refused. They said our gods had protected us for generations, and we could not betray them. The worst of it came when the strangers began to divide us, Mzee said, his voice shaking. They told us that we were not one people, that we were Kikuyu, or Kamba, or Luo, and that each of us must stay in our own place. They gave us new names, names that did not belong to us, names that tore us apart from each other. He paused, his face troubled. We used to be one people, united by the land, by our customs, by our songs. But when they divided us, they weakened us. We no longer knew who our neighbors were, who our cousins were. The ties that bound us together were cut, and in their place was distrust and fear. Mzee's voice grew quieter as he spoke of the land. They came with papers, with books, with pens, and they told us that our land was no longer ours. They called it registration. They marked off the land in squares, drew lines through our villages, and then they gave us papers with strange words on them, words that we could not read. His eyes became distant, as though the pain of that moment had never truly faded. And the land was taken from us. Not by war, not by force, but by the stroke of a pen. The land that had been ours for centuries was now theirs, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. They gave us laws, Mzee said, his voice thick with resentment. Laws that were foreign to us. Laws that told us how to live, how to speak, how to move through the world. They told us we were free, but the truth was that our freedom was gone. We could no longer live as we had. We could no longer follow the paths of the ancestors. Mzee's gaze turned to the horizon, where the first stars began to appear. The laws of the strangers made us prisoners in our own land. They told us how to farm, how to worship, how to raise our children. And we, who had lived free for so long, found ourselves bound by invisible chains. Mzee paused, looking into the fire, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. We fought, child. Oh, we fought. But it was not the fight of swords and spears. No, it was a fight of hearts, of dignity. The strangers had come to take everything from us, but they could never take our spirit, our Wendo Wa Moyo, the harmony of life. They tried to strip us of our pride, to make us forget who we were. But we remembered. His voice grew firm, and his hand clenched into a fist. The elders led us in protests, in small acts of defiance. We refused to work on their plantations, we refused to pay their taxes, and we refused to bow to their laws. It was not much, but it was enough to make them take notice. Mzee's mind wandered back to those early days of rebellion. There were no loud battles, no explosions. It was a silent revolt, one that rippled through the villages, through the hearts of our people. We stopped attending their schools. We stopped giving them our crops. It wasn't much, but it was a message that we would not be broken. We would not be their subjects. He smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. But even in the face of this defiance, the strangers came with their soldiers. They called us rebels and terrorists. They came with their guns, with their... He looked at the children gathered around him, their faces a mixture of curiosity and sorrow. I was there when the first of our young men were dragged away to the prisons. I was there when the fires of our villages were put out by their soldiers. And I was there when our voices were silenced, one by one. The air was thick with the weight of his words. The night had fallen completely now, and the stars glittered above like distant memories of a time before. Mzee Wainaina's voice softened. The world around us changed so slowly, at first. But with each passing day, we saw less and less of the old ways. The trees that had once whispered to us stood silent. The rivers no longer felt like home, and the laughter of the children, once so free and wild, was now muted by the strange new ways of the strangers. He paused, his eyes heavy with sadness. Our land, our people, our culture, all of it was being torn apart, piece by piece. and there was nothing we could do to stop it. Yet, even in our deepest sorrow, there was a spark, Mzee said, his voice rising with hope. There were those among us who refused to bow, who refused to forget the old ways. They began to organize in secret, to resist in ways that the strangers could not see. We had our own leaders, men and women who spoke the language of the land, who knew the songs of our ancestors. They told us that the struggle was not over. It was only just beginning. Mzee's face brightened, remembering the heroes of the resistance. And we joined them, one by one. We knew it would not be easy. We knew there would be hardships ahead. But we also knew that the spirit of our people could never be defeated. No matter what the strangers did, they could never take our hearts. Mzee's voice grew passionate as he spoke of the heroes who rose up in the face of colonial oppression. There was Dedan Kimathi, the warrior who led the fight against the strangers, the one who inspired our people to rise up, to fight for what was ours. There were many others, men and women who took to the hills and forests, who fought not just for land, but for our dignity, our right to live as we had always lived. He clenched his fist again. Their fight was not just for land, it was for the soul of the Kikuyu people. And though they fought with their lives, their bravery will never be forgotten. They are the true children of our ancestors, the ones who remembered the old songs and the old ways, and who died fighting to keep them alive. Mzee's face softened as he reflected on the cost of the resistance. But not all who fought survived. Many of our people were lost, taken by the soldiers, killed in the forests, or left to die in the prisons. The struggle for freedom was not without sacrifice. The land we loved so much became a battlefield, and the roads that once led us to each other now led to death. He looked down at his hands, which had lived through those dark times. I lost friends, brothers, sisters, all to the fight. I lost family members to the enemy's hands. But we fought because we knew the land was worth it. We fought because our ancestors had told us to never forget who we were, no matter how dark the night seemed. Even after the darkest days, Mzee continued, there was light. The resistance did not end with the death of Dedan Kimathi, nor with the imprisonment of our warriors. No, the spirit of our people could not be crushed so easily. It lived on in our hearts, in our songs, in our children. Mzee smiled, the old fire of the Kikuyu spirit returning to his eyes. And it was then, when we thought all was lost, that the world began to change once again. The strangers' empire began to crumble. Their iron roads, their churches, their schools, none of it could withstand the strength of our will, the strength of our people. The world had turned, and the light of freedom began to shine once again. The night was growing late, and the fire had burned down to embers. Mzee Wainaina's voice softened as he spoke of healing. We still carry the scars of those days, child. But the land is healing. Slowly, the trees are beginning to whisper again. Slowly, the rivers are flowing with life. And slowly, we are beginning to remember the old ways once more. He looked at his grandchildren, his heart full of hope. The land will always belong to the Kikuyu people, no matter what has been taken from us. It will always be ours, because it is not just soil. It is our home, our spirit. And as long as we remember who we are, no one can ever take that from us. Mzee Wainaina's voice was filled with reverence as he spoke of the return of the elders after the struggle. When the war was over and the strangers had left, we saw the elders return to the villages. Some had been imprisoned for years, others had disappeared into the forests and hills, but they all came back. The land had called them home, just as it had called us. He paused, his eyes distant as he remembered. We gathered under the mugumo tree, as we had before. The sun was high in the sky, and the wind carried the sense of the earth we had almost lost. And there, the elders spoke. They spoke of the fight, of the sacrifices, of the pain and loss. But they also spoke of hope, hope that the Kikuyu people would rise again, stronger than ever. The children sat in silence, absorbing every word Mzee said. We rebuilt, slowly but surely. We began to plant the seeds that had been taken from us, crops, trees, and dreams. The cows returned to our lands, grazing peacefully once more. The earth was ready to give again, and we were ready to receive it. Mzee smiled, the lines on his face softening. The children who had forgotten the old ways were taught again. They learned the songs, the dances, the stories of our people. They learned how to speak our language, how to greet the morning sun with gratitude. And they learned, most importantly, that the Kikuyu spirit could never be broken. The first harvest after the war was a special one, Mzee said with a proud glint in his eye. The fields that had been abandoned during the days of struggle now flourished. The maize, the millet, the beans, all grew as if they had been waiting for us to return. He leaned back against the tree, his hands resting on his knees. That harvest tasted sweeter than any before. Not because the crops were better, but because we had earned it. Every grain of maize, every stalk of millet, was a symbol of our resilience, our determination. It was a gift from the land, a gift we would never take for granted again. As the years passed, we began to notice something strange, Mzee continued. The land seemed to respond to us differently. The rains returned, falling when they were needed. The rivers began to flow more freely, as if they were remembering their old course. The trees began to grow taller, their branches heavy with fruit. He looked up at the stars, his gaze thoughtful. Some of us believed that this was the blessing of our ancestors. They had watched over us during the hard times, and now they were blessing us in return. It was as though the very earth itself had forgiven us for the struggles we had endured. The culture of the Kikuyu began to thrive once again, Mzee said, his voice warm with pride. The songs we had sung in secret during the hard years now rang out in the villages. The dances, the rituals, the stories, they returned to our hearts. The young people, who had once been caught between the world of the strangers and the world of the Kikuyu, now embraced their heritage with pride. He chuckled softly. I watched as the young men and women learned to weave baskets, to carve spears, to plant crops in the ways their grandparents had. It was as if the land itself had called them home. And in the evenings, around the fire, we told stories of the past, of the days before the strangers, and of the brave souls who had fought to protect what was ours. The healing took time, Mzee continued, his voice growing softer. The wounds of the past, though fading, were still there. We lost so much, our land, our freedom, our way of life. But we also gained something in return. We gained strength. We gained a deeper understanding of who we were and who we could be. He looked at the children gathered around him, their faces full of wonder. Our hearts healed, slowly but surely, as we remembered who we were. We are Kikuyu, born from the land, shaped by the ancestors, and bound together by the strength of our spirit. And no matter what happens, no matter how the world changes, we will always remember that. Even though the world has changed, Mzee said, the elders' wisdom still guides us. When we gather under the Mugumo tree, we remember the teachings they passed down to us. We remember their warnings, their advice, and their dreams for the future. He paused, a contemplative look crossing his face. I have lived a long life, child, and I have seen many things. But the greatest lesson I have learned is this. No matter what comes our way, no matter the challenges, the struggles, or the pain, we must always remember who we are. We must remember our roots, our land, and the ancestors who walked before us. Mzee's gaze softened as he looked at his grandchildren, the next generation of Kikuyu people. You, my children, are the future of this land. You carry the dreams of our ancestors in your hearts. You are the ones who will take the lessons we have learned and shape them into something even more beautiful. He smiled warmly. The world may change, and it will. But if you hold on to the spirit of the Kikuyu, the spirit of resilience, of community, of love for the land, you will carry our story forward. And one day, when you are old, you will sit beneath a Mugumo tree, and you will tell your children the stories of the past. And they will listen, just as you are listening now. Mzee Wainaina's voice grew more reflective, as though he could feel the weight of time itself. Even though we had reclaimed much, the winds of change were still blowing. The world around us was shifting. The strangers who had once taken our land were now retreating, But new challenges were on the horizon. Our young ones were no longer just children of the land, but citizens of a new world, a world of cities, cars, and machines. He gazed into the distance, where the hills met the sky, a faint shadow of the past lingering. And with these changes came a struggle for balance. The young ones, with their dreams of progress, often looked to the cities and the machines as symbols of hope. But we, the elders, knew that true progress lay not in abandoning the past, but in honoring it while embracing the future. The tension between tradition and progress began to grow, Mzee continued. As the young ones left the villages to seek work in the cities, they began to forget the rhythms of the earth, the way the soil called us to care for it, the way the trees and animals were part of our family. They spoke of education, of factories, of modernity. Mzee's eyes grew distant. And yet, even as the new world began to encroach upon us, there was still something powerful in the old ways. We knew that to honor the land, to remember the ancestors, was to stay rooted in the past, while allowing the present to grow. It was not an easy path, but it was one that we had to walk together. Mzee's voice became soft, almost wistful, as he spoke of the changing roles of the elders. We elders, who had once been the keepers of wisdom, found ourselves challenged. The world was moving faster than we could follow, and the young ones, eager for knowledge, eager for change, began to question our ways. They wanted to understand the world through the lens of the strangers, to learn their science, their mathematics, their laws. He shook his head slowly. We did not resist, child. We could not. The world had changed, and we had to let it. But we also knew that the roots of the Kikuyu would not be uprooted so easily. The new generation would learn, yes, but they would also carry the essence of the past within them. For that was the true strength of our people, our ability to adapt without losing ourselves. There were times when I feared that we might lose ourselves in the tide of change, Mzee confessed. He paused, his voice tinged with emotion. But when the young ones returned, when they understood the power of the past and the connection to the land, they decided to plant a new Mugumo tree in the village square. It was a small sapling at first, but it grew strong and tall, just as our people did. And every year, when the tree blossomed, we gathered beneath its branches to remember, to celebrate, and to honor the ancestors who had given us everything. Do you know, child, that the songs of the Kikuyu were never truly forgotten? Mzee continued, his voice warm with pride. Even when the strangers tried to silence us, even when our tongues were forced to speak their language, we never stopped singing. The songs of the Kikuyu were carried in the hearts of our people, passed on in whispers, in secret gatherings, and in the quiet moments between father and child. He smiled as he remembered the first time his grandchildren sang the old songs with him. When they sang, I could hear the voices of the ancestors. The words may have changed a little, the melodies may have shifted, but the spirit of the song was the same. It was a song of unity, of strength, of hope, a song that would never fade, as long as the Kikuyu spirit remained alive. As Mzee continued, he shifted to a topic that had become ever more important with the years since the struggle for independence. We knew that the future of our people rested not just in the soil, but in the minds of our children. Education, child, is a powerful tool. It can build, it can create, and it can tear down. But it must be used wisely, with respect for the past and an understanding of the present. He looked at his grandchildren, his voice became nervous. We sent you to school, not just to learn the ways of the strangers, but to learn how to use their knowledge to protect and grow. The world will continue to change, and you must adapt, but never forget who you are. Never forget the land, the songs, the stories that have shaped you. Mzee's gaze grew heavy as he spoke of the burden of memory. Sometimes, child, the past can be a heavy thing to carry. The pain, the loss, the struggles, they never truly leave us. They are like shadows that follow us wherever we go. And yet, in those shadows, there is light. For every pain we endure, there is a lesson. For every loss, there is a victory. He leaned forward, his voice low and steady. But we must not dwell in the past forever. The world moves forward, and so must we. We carry the past with us, but we do not let it hold us back. The spirit of the Kikuyu is not just about remembering. It is about moving forward with strength, with honor, and with a deep connection to the land and each other. Mzee's words grew hopeful as he spoke of the future. The future of our people lies in unity. Child, we must stand together, as one, no matter where we are or what challenges we face. We are Kikuyu, and that bond is stronger than any division. He looked around at the gathering of his family, his voice full of love. It is unity that has carried us through the darkest of times. It is unity that will carry us into the future. And as long as we remain united, no force, no colonialism, no machine, no city will ever break us. As Mzee's story reached its end, he smiled at the children gathered around. Tomorrow, child, is a promise. It is a promise that we will continue to grow, to learn, and to honor the land that sustains us. Tomorrow is not just a day that follows today. It is the seed of the future, and we must plant it carefully, with love and respect. We looked out at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to rise again. And when tomorrow comes, when the world changes again, we will be ready, because we carry with us the wisdom of our ancestors, the strength of our people, and the unbreakable bond we share with each other. Mzee paused, a gentle breeze lifting the hairs on his weathered face. I see the changes coming, child, he murmured. The world is shifting once again. New generations are rising with their own dreams, their own ideas. But in all that change, there is one thing that will always remain, the presence of the ancestors. He placed a hand over his chest, where his heart beat strong. The ancestors watch over us, guiding us through each challenge. And though the winds may blow fiercely, they will never uproot what is firmly planted in the soil. The Kikuyu spirit is like the Mugumo tree, deep-rooted and unwavering. His eyes shone with a quiet fire as he looked to the future. We may not be able to hold back the changes that come with time, but we can guide the next generation to carry forward the wisdom of those who walked before us. As long as we remember the past, the present will remain strong, and the future will flourish. The stories we share, Mzee said, his voice low, are not just tales of what happened long ago. They are the lessons of our lives, the tools that help us navigate the complexities of the world. They are the fabric of who we are. He leaned closer to the children. When you hear the stories of the old ones, when you listen to the tales of your ancestors, remember that they are not just stories. They are the wisdom of the land, the whispers of the earth, the lessons that keep us grounded when the storms of life threaten to sweep us away. Mzee closed his eyes for a moment, letting the stillness fill him. These stories will be passed down, just as they have been passed down through the ages. And as long as you tell them, the Kikuyu spirit will never fade. Mzee's hands gently stroked the soil beneath him as he continued, his voice full of reverence. The land, child, is more than just earth beneath our feet. It is a living entity, a source of strength, of life, of sustenance. It is the foundation of everything in life. He looked over the fields, the rich earth where they had planted so much. The land does not just give us crops. It gives us identity. It gives us the ability to connect with our ancestors, for they, too, walked this soil. They understood its rhythms, its language. Mzee leaned back against the tree, his eyes distant. The land speaks to us if we listen. It teaches us patience, resilience, and harmony. We must never take it for granted. When we care for the land, we honor our ancestors. When we care for the land, we nurture the future. Mzee's voice became more solemn. When I was young, the elders would gather us around the fire and share their knowledge. There was no written word, no books, only voice grew firm again. But I also saw something else. I saw the unity of the Kikuyu people. We may have been spread across different villages, different towns, and even different countries, but the bond that tied us together was still strong. We were a people bound by our history, by our love for the land, and by the memories of those who had come before. Mzee smiled, his face softening in the glow of the fire. As the years passed, I began to see a new dawn on the horizon. The young ones, though they had once strayed, began to return to the land. They brought with them new ideas, new skills, but they also brought a renewed respect for the earth and its rhythms. They began to understand that progress did not mean abandoning the past. It meant building upon it, growing in harmony with it. He leaned forward, his voice quiet but powerful. And in that harmony, child, we found a new strength. A strength that came not from clinging to the past, nor from rushing blindly into the future, but from finding a balance. We learned to honor both the old ways and the new. And in doing so, we ensured that the Kikuyu spirit would never be lost. One of the most beautiful things I have seen in my lifetime, Mzee said, his eyes alight with joy, was the rebirth of our villages. The young ones returned home, bringing with them the knowledge they had gained. They rebuilt the homes that had fallen into disrepair, and they revived the old traditions, our songs, our dances, our rituals. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling with happiness. And the elders, though we were fewer, were there to guide them, to remind them of where we came from. We taught them the old ways, not to trap them in the past, but to give them a foundation from which to grow. We taught them that the land would always provide, but it would only do so if we treated it with respect. Mzee's voice was filled with pride as he spoke of the future. Our children, child, are no longer just inheritors of the land. They are inheritors of the spirit of the Kikuyu. They carry with them the strength of the ancestors, the wisdom of the elders, and the promise of the future. He looked up at the sky, where the first rays of the sun began to appear. As they go forward, they will face new challenges, new struggles. But they will also carry the song of the Kikuyu in their hearts. And that song will guide them, just as it has guided us for generations. Mzee Wainaina's voice grew tender as he finished his tale. The land, the people, the spirit, they are one. And though the world changes, that bond will never be broken. We may move forward, we may face challenges, but the heart of the Kikuyu will always remain the same. He looked at the children, his gaze steady and full of love. You, my children, are the future of this land. You will carry the torch, just as I have, just as my father did before me. And when the time comes, you will tell your own children the stories of our people. And they, too, will carry the flame, and the spirit of the Kikuyu will live on, forever. The fire crackled softly as Mzee leaned back, his voice trailing off into the night. The children sat in quiet awe, listening to the wisdom of the elder, knowing that the stories of their ancestors would live on in their hearts, guiding them through whatever the future held. Mzee Wainaina's voice grew quiet, filled with reverence for the elders who had passed before him. As time marched on, I saw many of the old ones leave this world. One by one, they went to join the ancestors, their spirits joining the land they had loved and protected. Some passed peacefully in their sleep, their faces serene. Others went more abruptly, their lives stolen by illness or the trials of old age. He looked out at the horizon, where the first rays of dawn were slowly breaking through the darkness. But every time an elder left, there was a sense that their wisdom was not lost. It was passed on, like a fire from one hand to another. We shared their stories, their teachings, their lessons, and we carried their strength in our hearts. He smiled faintly. I, too, will one day join the ancestors, but I know that my journey will not be the end. The stories will continue. The fire will continue to burn. Our children will carry it forward, and one day, they will tell the stories of their own journeys, just as I have told mine. Mzee's face softened with warmth as he spoke of the younger generation. I remember the day my own children returned from the city after many years away. They came with their children, my grandchildren, their faces full of curiosity, their eyes wide with wonder. They had seen a different world, a world of tall buildings and busy streets, but when they returned to the village, they felt the pull of the land. They felt the connection to the Kikuyu spirit that lived here, in the soil, the rivers, and the mountains. He chuckled softly. At first, they were unsure. They had forgotten the old ways, or perhaps they had not learned them fully. But the land has a way of calling you back, child. It speaks to you in ways that words cannot. It calls you to remember your roots, your family, your ancestors. He paused, the smile fading as he grew more serious. And so, they returned, not just with their bodies, but with their hearts. They began to reconnect with their heritage, to learn the ways of the land and the people. They learned the songs, the dances, and the stories once more. They learned to respect the earth, and in doing so, they began to understand the strength of the Kikuyu people. Mzee's eyes brightened as he spoke of the return of the sacred Mugumo tree to the heart of their village. The Mugumo tree had always been a symbol of our people, the place where we gathered, where we made decisions, where we celebrated and mourned. But during the hard years, when the strangers were in control, the Mugumo tree had been cut down. It had been a symbol in those days. We learned the old ways through stories, through songs, through rituals. Each lesson was a part of a larger whole, a piece of the puzzle that made us who we were. He looked at his grandchildren with a knowing smile. And now, the knowledge that was once passed from elder to child is written in books, shared through classrooms and technology. But the essence of that knowledge, the spirit of it, will always live on in the heart. The heart remembers what the mind might forget. Mzee paused and looked up at the sky, where the first rays of the sun began to light the world. In the Kikuyu tradition, we believe that the sun is a gift from the gods. It is a reminder that every day is a new beginning, a new chance to make things right. He turned to the children, his eyes filled with hope. As the sun rises on this new day, so too does the promise of the future. Every challenge we face, every obstacle, is just another opportunity for growth. We must rise with the sun, face the world with strength, and carry forward the legacy of our ancestors. His voice grew warm, full of conviction. The rising sun reminds us that no matter how dark the night, the light of the new day will always shine through. And with that light, we will move forward, together. The unity of our people has always been our greatest strength, Mzee said with deep affection. Even in the darkest times, when we were scattered and divided, the spirit of the Kikuyu remained unbroken. And that spirit was carried in the songs we sang together, the dances we performed. He chuckled softly. You see, child, the songs were not just for celebration. They were a way of calling us back to each other, a way of reminding us that we are never alone. No matter where we go, no matter how far we travel, we are bound by the same spirit. Mzee's voice grew stronger. And so, the song of unity returned. It was sung by the young and the old alike, in the villages and in the cities. It carried the same message it always had. We are one people, bound together by love, by heritage, and by our shared past. Mzee's voice softened again as he spoke of the land and its connection to the Kikuyu people. The land is not just our provider. It is our partner. When we plant the seeds, we do so with reverence. When we harvest the crops, we do so with gratitude. He placed a hand over his heart. In every action we take, we are reminded of the land's generosity. It gives us everything we need: food, shelter, life. And in return, we care for it, protect it, honor it. He smiled, a deep warmth in his eyes. We are bound to the land by a heartbeat that is older than time itself. The Kikuyu people and the land, they are one. And no matter where we go, no matter how far we travel, that heartbeat will always guide us home. Mzee leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with pride. And that, child, is the true strength of the Kikuyu people. It is not in the tools we use or the cities we build. It is not in the wealth we gather or the power we wield. The strength of the Kikuyu is in the spirit that refuses to be broken, no matter how harsh the winds blow. He paused, letting his words sink in. Through war, through hardship, through loss, the Kikuyu spirit endures. It is resilient, unyielding, and filled with a quiet strength. The spirit lives on in each of you, in every heartbeat, in every step you take. He smiled warmly, his gaze fond. And as long as that spirit lives, as long as the land remains, the Kikuyu will continue to thrive. The circle of life, Mzee said, reflecting on the years that had passed, is not just a concept, but a truth we live by. We are born, we grow, we learn, and one day, we return to the earth. But in that cycle, there is something beautiful, something sacred. He smiled at the children. You are the next generation, the next link in the chain. The time will come when you will be the elders, sharing your wisdom with those who come after you. But until then, you must continue the journey. Continue to learn, to grow, to love the land, and to honor the ancestors. His voice grew quiet with affection. And one day, when you are old and grey, you will sit beneath the Mugumo tree, just as I have done, and tell your own children the stories of the Kikuyu people. You will pass on the knowledge and the wisdom, and the circle will continue. Mzee's voice lowered, yet the intensity in his words grew stronger. Courage, child, is not just about fighting battles. It is about standing tall in the face of adversity, about facing the unknown with a heart full of resolve. It is about knowing who you are and where you come from, and refusing to let anything shake your foundation. He glanced around at the children, his eyes steady. We inherited courage from our ancestors, those who fought to protect the land, who stood up against forces that sought to take away our identity. But true courage is not just in the act of war, it is in the quiet acts of resistance. It is in the refusal to be swayed by fear, to hold on to what is right even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. He paused, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of the years he had lived. And that courage must be passed on. You must carry it with you, even when times seem dark. The world will test you, but if you have courage, you will endure. Mzee leaned back, his gaze softening as he looked at the fire that had been stoked earlier that evening. The fireside has always been a sacred place, child, he said thoughtfully. It is where we gather, where stories are shared, and where warmth fills the heart as much as the body. The fire does not just burn wood, it burns the darkness away. It illuminates our paths, shows us the way when the night is long. He looked over at the young faces sitting around him. When I was your age, I would sit by the fire with my grandfather, listening to his stories of the past. The fire held the warmth of his presence, even when he was gone. And when the fire was low, we knew it was time to pass on our lessons to the next generation. Mzee smiled gently. In the same way, the lessons we learn, the stories we tell, continue to burn brightly through the years, passed from one generation to the next. The flame of our heritage will never die. Mzee's eyes began to reflect a more somber tone as he spoke of the changing world. I see the changes in the world, child. It is not just the passing of time, but the rise of new ideas, new ways of life. The world has grown smaller, the cities larger, and the winds of change blow even stronger now. He sighed, but his voice remained firm. It is a time of great uncertainty. The values we held dear, the customs that bound us, are often challenged by new ways. But this is not a time to fear change. It is a time to adapt, to find strength in the wisdom we have inherited, and to build a future that honors the past while embracing the possibilities of tomorrow. He looked deeply into the horizon, where the stars were beginning to fade with the approaching dawn. We must find our place in this changing world, but never forget the land. Never forget the lessons our ancestors taught us. In change, there is always an opportunity for growth. We must hold on to what is sacred while learning to navigate the future with grace. Mzee's gaze softened as he reflected on the simpler times of the past. There was beauty in simplicity, child. In those days before the world became so complicated, life had a natural rhythm. We woke with the sun and slept with the moon. We ate what the land provided, and we celebrated the bounty of nature. He closed his eyes for a moment, recalling the days when life was slower, more intimate. There were no distractions, no rush to accumulate. We spent our days working the land, building our homes, tending to our animals, and caring for one another. We lived in harmony with the earth, taking only what we needed and giving back what we could. He looked at the children, his voice soft but clear. The world today is full of noise. The pace is faster. But remember, child, there is a beauty in slowing down, in finding peace in the simple things, in walking barefoot on the earth, feeling the warmth of the sun on your skin, and listening to the wind speak through the trees. That simplicity is a gift that should not be lost. Mzee spoke with great reverence about the importance of family and name. The name you carry is more than just a sound. It is a legacy, a connection to your ancestors, to the land, to the community. In our Kikuyu culture, our names are a reflection of who we are, of where we come from, and the story that our family has carried through the generations. He looked at his grandchildren, his voice filled with pride. When I see you, I see the future of our family, the continuation of a long line of Kikuyu people who have known joy and sorrow, triumph and loss. Your name is a thread that ties you to all that came before. It is a mark of your strength, your courage, and your duty to carry forward the traditions that have shaped you. Mzee paused, his eyes reflecting the depth of his thoughts. Honor your name, child. It is a sacred trust. It is a promise to those who walked before you that you will continue their work, and a promise to those who come after you that you will build a future worthy of the name. Mzee's face lit up as he recalled a cherished tradition of the Kikuyu people, the ceremony of the first harvest. Ah, child, there is no joy greater than the first fruits of the season. The ceremony of the first harvest was a time of great celebration. It was a reminder that the land had provided, that the hard work of the year had paid off, and that we were truly connected to the earth. He smiled nostalgically. We would gather as a community, each family bringing their portion of the harvest to share. The elders would lead the prayers, giving thanks to Nai, the god of the Kikuyu, for the bounty that had been given to us. The children would dance around the fire, and the air would be filled with music, laughter, and the sweet smell of roasted maize and meat. He gazed at the horizon as he spoke softly. That ceremony was a time for renewal, for a deeper connection to the land and to each other. It was a reminder of what it meant to be part of a community, part of a cycle of life that has always been, and will always be, sustained by the earth. Mzee's tone shifted as he grew more serious. But as the years passed, child, I began to see changes in the land. The trees were cut down, the rivers polluted, and the soil began to lose its strength. The land that had sustained us for so long was being threatened, and with it, our way of life was in danger. He clenched his fists, a fire igniting in his heart. We must protect the land, child. We must honor it, for it is the very foundation of our existence. Without it, we have nothing. It is the duty of every Kikuyu to stand guard over the earth, to ensure that the generations to come will know the same connection to the land that we have known. Mzee looked deeply into the children's eyes. I may not be around forever, but it is my hope that each of you will carry the message of the land's importance. Protect it, nurture it, for it is the heart of who we are. As the sun began to rise, Mzee Wainaina reflected on the wisdom shared by the Kikuyu elders. In our time, he said softly, there was the Council of Elders, a gathering where the leaders of the community came together to share knowledge, solve disputes, and guide the younger generations. His eyes grew distant as he remembered the calm, deliberate pace of those councils. It was not just a meeting of minds, it was a gathering of spirits. The elders would sit under the large mugumo tree, their voices carrying through the air as they discussed matters of great importance. Every word spoken had weight, and every decision made was meant to guide the community toward balance and harmony. Mzee looked at his grandchildren. In those councils, there was a respect for silence, for listening. It was said that Nai himself listens in the silence, and that only through deep listening could one understand the true needs of the people and the land. Mzee sat upright, his voice growing more passionate as he continued. We, the Kikuyu, understand the importance of relationships. Our ties to each other, to our ancestors, to the land, and to our community, form the foundation of who we are. They are sacred bonds that cannot be broken easily. He glanced over at his family. You see, when a person is born, they are not born into isolation. They are born into a web of relationships, relationships that have been nurtured for generations. A child is not just the son or daughter of their parents. They are the grandchild of their grandparents, the great-grandchild of their great-grandparents. Their name carries the weight of the family and the village. He paused, his eyes softening with a deep love for his people. These ties are what make us stronger than any force that comes to divide us. The bonds between the Kikuyu people are unbreakable. And no matter how far we travel, no matter where we go, these ties will always draw us back home. Mzee's tone shifted as he spoke of the healing properties of the land. The earth, child, has always been a source of healing. The plants, the trees, the rivers, they are not just there for sustenance, they have a deeper power. In the old days, when sickness struck, it was the elders who would seek out the herbs, the roots, and the sacred places where the land could offer its medicine. He looked down at the earth beneath him. There were no hospitals, no modern cures, but the land knew how to restore us. It knew how to heal our bodies and our spirits. The Mugumo tree, for example, was said to hold great healing power. It was not just a tree, it was a link to Nai, a source of strength and vitality. Mzee's voice became quiet, full of reverence. We must remember that the earth has a way of healing, if only we take the time to listen to it. The land gives, and we must learn to give back. Mzee's eyes sparkled with pride as he spoke of the Kikuyu warriors. In the days before colonization, the Kikuyu were a strong and proud people. The warriors of the community were not just fighters. They were protectors of our values, our land, and our way of life. They understood that true strength came not from violence, but from honor, discipline, and respect. He told the children of the brave warriors who fought for the freedom of their people, whose courage became legend. But the strength of a warrior was not just in their arms, child. It was in their heart. It was in their ability to defend the weak, to protect the land, and to fight for what was right, even when the odds were against them. Mzee smiled gently, his voice filled with a deep pride. A true warrior knows that the fight is not always external. Sometimes, the greatest battles are fought within. And those who can conquer their own fears, their own doubts, are the true warriors of our people. Mzee closed his eyes for a moment, and the sound of distant drumming seemed to fill the air around them. The drum, he said, his voice hushed, is the heartbeat of our people. It calls us together, reminds us of who we are. When the drum beats, we respond, for it is the sound of our ancestors calling us home. He spoke of the many rituals and ceremonies where the drum was central, calling the people to come together to celebrate, to mourn, to remember. The rhythm of the drum is the rhythm of life itself. It tells the story of our existence, from birth to death, from joy to sorrow. And it connects us to the spirits of those who came before us. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Whenever you hear the drum, child, remember that it is not just a sound. It is a message. It is the spirit of our people, always alive, always present, and always with us. Mzee smiled knowingly, his voice soft as he shared the lesson. Knowledge is a treasure, child. But it is not just found in books. It is found in the land, in the sky, in the waters, and in the hearts of our elders. It is passed down, not just through words, but through actions, through the way we live our lives. He gestured to the horizon, where the first light of dawn was breaking. In the Kikuyu tradition, the knowledge of the earth, the knowledge of the stars, the knowledge of the seasons, they were all part of the curriculum of life. We learned from nature, from our community, and from the elders who took the time to teach us. His voice was full of warmth as he continued, "To know is to understand. To understand is to respect. And to respect is to honor the world around you. That is the true path of knowledge, the path that connects you to the earth, to your ancestors, and to your people." Mzee's eyes softened as he spoke of the women who had shaped their society. The women of the Kikuyu people are the backbone of our community. They are the heart of our homes, the nurturers of our children, the keepers of our traditions. He smiled warmly as he spoke of his own mother and grandmother. The women in our community had strength that could not be measured. They worked the land, they cared for their families, and they upheld the values of our people with grace and dignity. It was said that the power of the Kikuyu woman came not from force, but from her wisdom, her kindness, and her fierce love for her family. Mzee looked at his grandchildren, his voice filled with admiration. A woman's legacy is built not just in what she does, but in the lives she touches. The Kikuyu women carried the wisdom of the ancestors, and they passed it down to their daughters, ensuring that the strength of our people would never falter. Mzee's voice grew steady, almost reverent, as he spoke of the role of the elder in Kikuyu society. In our culture, the elder is the keeper of wisdom. They are the ones who have lived through the seasons of life, who have seen the cycle of joy and sorrow, of growth and decay. And it is through them that we understand the deeper meanings of our existence. He looked at the children gathered around him. As an elder, you are not just a person of age, but a person of knowledge, of experience. You are someone who has witnessed the world change, yet you remain rooted in the traditions that give life meaning. The role of the elder is not to rule with an iron fist, but to guide, to teach, and to nurture the next generation. Mzee's gaze grew distant as he reflected on his own time as an elder. "I have been blessed to share my knowledge with you, but even I am learning every day. The circle of life is endless. The work of an elder is never finished because wisdom, like the river, keeps flowing, passing from one generation to the next." He paused, his face thoughtful. When the harvest came in, we would share with those who had none. When a person fell ill, the whole community would rally to provide food, herbs, and comfort. It wasn't just the responsibility of the immediate family, it was the responsibility of all. Mzee looked at his grandchildren, his eyes reflecting the depth of his words. In those days, we understood that if one person suffers, we all suffer. If one person prospers, we all prosper. The village was not a collection of individuals, it was a living organism, where every person, every family, contributed to the health of the whole. As the last rays of the setting sun bathed the land, Mzee began to speak of silence. Silence, child, is often overlooked, but it has a power all its own. In our culture, silence was not a void to be filled, but a space to listen, to reflect, and to connect with the divine. His voice softened, as if recalling a distant memory. The elders would sit in silence before they spoke. They would listen to the wind, to the birds, to the sounds of the land. In that silence, they could hear the heartbeat of the earth. They could feel the pulse of life. Mzee looked at his grandchildren. Silence teaches us patience. It teaches us to listen more than we speak, to seek understanding before rushing to judgment. In a world filled with noise, silence is a precious gift. It is in silence that we find clarity, wisdom, and peace. As Mzee's gaze drifted to the horizon, his expression shifted. But even in times of peace, child, change is inevitable. In the years before colonization, we began to hear whispers of foreign invaders, of strangers who sought to change our way of life. His voice became more somber. At first, they came with gifts, with promises of a better future. They told us of things we had never seen before: tools, machines, ideas, and we were curious. We welcomed them, not knowing that their arrival would mark the beginning of the end of our way of life. Mzee's eyes clouded with the memory of those early days. But it wasn't long before we saw the true nature of their intentions. They did not come to learn from us, they came to take from us. They came to claim our land, to rewrite our history, and to erase our identity. The fire crackled as Mzee's tone grew heavy with the weight of history. When they began to take our land, to force us from our homes, we knew that the time had come to stand up and defend what was ours. We had no choice but to resist, to fight for our land, for our people, and for the generations that would come after us. He leaned forward, his voice fierce. We fought with everything we had, our bodies, our minds, and our hearts. But it was not just a physical fight. It was a spiritual one. We fought to protect our identity, our culture, and the very essence of who we were. Mzee's eyes grew wet with the memory. Many of our people were lost in the struggle. But we never gave up, for we knew that the land was ours, and no foreign power could take it from us. Mzee's voice grew quiet as he spoke of the price paid by those who resisted. The fight for our land came at a great cost. Our brothers and sisters were killed, imprisoned, and forced to live under the weight of colonial oppression. Many of our elders were silenced, their voices drowned out by the forces that sought to erase our culture. He paused, a deep sadness in his eyes. But even in the darkest times, our people held on to their beliefs. They carried the torch of our ancestors, even when it seemed like the world was against them. And though many of us were scattered, our spirit remained unbroken. Mzee sighed. The struggle was not just for land, it was for our right to exist as a people, to live as our ancestors lived, and to ensure that our culture would not be forgotten. Mzee's voice became stronger as he spoke of the resilience of the Kikuyu people. Despite the hardships, despite the pain and loss, our people endured. We adapted, we found ways to survive, and we kept our traditions alive, even in the face of adversity. He looked out over the land, his heart swelling with pride. The Kikuyu are a resilient people. We have always been able to find strength in our roots, in our culture, and in each other. Even when the world around us changes, we remain grounded in what matters most. Mzee smiled softly. The resilience of the Kikuyu is in our blood. We may have been beaten down, but we have never been broken. And we will continue to rise, just as our ancestors did, no matter the challenges we face. As the night grew darker, Mzee spoke of the displacement that came with colonialism. Many of our people were forced to leave their ancestral lands, to move to areas far from home. Families were torn apart, and entire communities were uprooted. He sighed deeply, but even in displacement, we found ways to survive. We built new homes, new communities, and new lives. We kept our traditions alive, even in the face of loss. For no matter where we went, our culture was always with us, carried in our hearts. Mzee's eyes softened. The land may have been taken from us, but the land is never truly lost. It remains in our hearts, in our memories, and in the stories we pass down. And as long as we remember, the land will never be forgotten. Mzee's voice grew more passionate as he spoke of the importance of education. Even under colonial rule, we knew that education was key to the survival of our culture. It was not just about reading and writing, it was about understanding who we were, where we came from, and where we were going. He leaned forward, his eyes bright with conviction. Our people fought for the right to educate their children. They fought against those who sought to silence our language, our history, and our values. They knew that without education, our culture would be lost. Mzee's smile was gentle. And though it was difficult, though the colonial forces tried to erase our identity, we never stopped teaching. We taught our children the stories of our people, the songs of our ancestors, and the wisdom of the elders. And through education, we ensured that our culture would survive. His voice grew firm again. But I also saw something else. I saw the unity of the Kikuyu people. We may have been spread across different villages, different towns, and even different countries, but the bond that tied us together was still strong. We were a people bound by our history, by our love for the land, and by the memories of those who had come before. Mzee smiled, his face softening in the glow of the fire. As the years passed, I began to see a new dawn on the horizon. The young ones, though they had once strayed, began to return to the land. They brought with them new ideas, new skills, but they also brought a renewed respect for the earth and its rhythms. They began to understand that progress did not mean abandoning the past. It meant building upon it, growing in harmony with it. He leaned forward, his voice quiet but powerful. And in that harmony, child, we found a new strength. A strength that came not from clinging to the past, nor from rushing blindly into the future, but from finding a balance. We learned to honor both the old ways and the new. And in doing so, we ensured that the Kikuyu spirit would never be lost. One of the most beautiful things I have seen in my lifetime, Mzee said, his eyes alight with joy, was the rebirth of our villages. The young ones returned home, bringing with them the knowledge they had gained. They rebuilt the homes that had fallen into disrepair, and they revived the old traditions, our songs, our dances, our rituals. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling with happiness. And the elders, though we were fewer, were there to guide them, to remind them of where we came from. We taught them the old ways, not to trap them in the past, but to give them a foundation from which to grow. We taught them that the land would always provide, but it would only do so if we treated it with respect. Mzee's voice was filled with pride as he spoke of the future. Our children, child, are no longer just inheritors of the land. They are inheritors of the spirit of the Kikuyu. They carry with them the strength of the ancestors, the wisdom of the elders, and the promise of the future. He looked up at the sky, where the first rays of the sun began to appear. As they go forward, they will face new challenges, new struggles. But they will also carry the song of the Kikuyu in their hearts. And that song will guide them, just as it has guided us for generations. Mzee Wainaina's voice grew tender as he finished his tale. The land, the people, the spirit, they are one. And though the world changes, that bond will never be broken. We may move forward, we may face challenges, but the heart of the Kikuyu will always remain the same. He looked at the children, his gaze steady and full of love. You, my children, are the future of this land. You will carry the torch, just as I have, just as my father did before me. And when the time comes, you will tell your own children the stories of our people. And they, too, will carry the flame, and the spirit of the Kikuyu will live on, forever. The fire crackled softly as Mzee leaned back, his voice trailing off into the night. The children sat in quiet awe, listening to the wisdom of the elder, knowing that the stories of their ancestors would live on in their hearts, guiding them through whatever the future held. Mzee Wainaina's voice grew quiet, filled with reverence for the elders who had passed before him. As time marched on, I saw many of the old ones leave this world. One by one, they went to join the ancestors, their spirits joining the land they had loved and protected. Some passed peacefully in their sleep, their faces serene. Others went more abruptly, their lives stolen by illness or the trials of old age. He looked out at the horizon, where the first rays of dawn were slowly breaking through the darkness. But every time an elder left, there was a sense that their wisdom was not lost. It was passed on, like a fire from one hand to another. We shared their stories, their teachings, their lessons, and we carried their strength in our hearts. He smiled faintly. I, too, will one day join the ancestors, but I know that my journey will not be the end. The stories will continue. The fire will continue to burn. Our children will carry it forward, and one day, they will tell the stories of their own journeys, just as I have told mine. Mzee's face softened with warmth as he spoke of the younger generation. I remember the day my own children returned from the city after many years away. They came with their children, my grandchildren, their faces full of curiosity, their eyes wide with wonder. They had seen a different world, a world of tall buildings and busy streets, but when they returned to the village, they felt the pull of the land. They felt the connection to the Kikuyu spirit that lived here, in the soil, the rivers, and the mountains. He chuckled softly. At first, they were unsure. They had forgotten the old ways, or perhaps they had not learned them fully. But the land has a way of calling you back, child. It speaks to you in ways that words cannot. It calls you to remember your roots, your family, your ancestors. He paused, the smile fading as he grew more serious. And so, they returned, not just with their bodies, but with their hearts. They began to reconnect with their heritage, to learn the ways of the land and the people. They learned the songs, the dances, and the stories once more. They learned to respect the earth, and in doing so, they began to understand the strength of the Kikuyu people. Mzee's eyes brightened as he spoke of the return of the sacred Mugumo tree to the heart of their village. The Mugumo tree had always been a symbol of our people, the place where we gathered, where we made decisions, where we celebrated and mourned. But during the hard years, when the strangers were in control, the Mugumo tree had been cut down. It had been a symbol. Mzee's eyes shone with hope as he spoke of the future. Despite everything, child, I believe we will return to the land. We will rebuild our communities, restore our culture, and reclaim our place in the world. He gestured to the horizon, where the stars began to appear. The land is patient. It waits for us to come home. And when we do, we will honor our ancestors by tending the land, by caring for the earth, and by keeping our traditions alive. Mzee's voice became quiet with determination. The land will always be ours. No matter how many times it is taken, no matter how many times we are forced to leave, the land will always call us home. Mzee's voice grew somber as he spoke of a painful time in their history. When colonial rule took hold, they tried to erase our language, our very way of speaking. They told us that our language was not worth learning, that it was primitive. They forced our children to speak the foreign tongue, to abandon the Kikuyu in favor of the colonizer's language. He paused for a moment, his eyes distant. And so, many of our words were lost. Many of our songs, our proverbs, our stories, things that had been passed down through generations, began to fade into silence. We were forced to forget who we were in order to survive in a world that sought to change us. Mzee's voice softened, almost wistful. But even in the face of this erasure, we never stopped speaking our language. We spoke Kikuyu in secret, in our homes, in the corners of the village. The language may have been suppressed, but it could never be fully silenced. Mzee's eyes sparkled with a fierce pride as he spoke of the courage of the Kikuyu people. In the face of oppression, the Kikuyu did not give up. We found strength in resistance. The spirit of our ancestors burned within us, and we rose against the forces that sought to tear us apart. He told of the rise of the Mau Mau movement, the freedom fighters who took up arms to defend their land and their people. The Mau Mau were not just warriors. They were the embodiment of our struggle. They fought not only to reclaim our land, but to reclaim our dignity, our culture, and our right to live as free people. Mzee's voice grew passionate. It was a long and bloody fight, and many of our people were lost. But the fire of resistance never died. It was passed from one generation to the next, and it was in this struggle that we found our power. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Mzee's voice held a note of triumph. The Mau Mau, though outnumbered and outgunned, fought with all the strength of the earth itself. They understood that the fight was not just for land, but for freedom, for the future of our people. He spoke of the sacrifices made during those years of bloodshed and hardship, of the men and women who stood firm in the face of overwhelming odds. Through their courage and perseverance, the colonial forces were finally forced to recognize the power of the Kikuyu people. The land was returned, and we began the long journey towards freedom. Mzee smiled with quiet pride. It was a hard-won victory, but it was a victory for our ancestors, for our culture, and for the future generations. The spirit of the Kikuyu could not be crushed. Mzee's voice softened as he spoke of the years following independence. When the land was returned to us, we had to rebuild. Our homes, our villages, our lives had been scattered, and many of our people had been broken by the hardships of colonial rule. He looked out over the land. But we are a resilient people. We came together to rebuild, to restore our traditions, and to reclaim our place in the world. It was not easy, but we did it with the strength of our ancestors behind us. Mzee's eyes twinkled as he remembered. We planted crops again, built homes again, and, most importantly, we taught our children the ways of our people. The language, the songs, the dances, they returned. Slowly, but surely, the spirit of the Kikuyu people was restored. Mzee's expression grew thoughtful as he spoke of the present day. Though we have regained our land, our culture, and our identity, there is a new challenge before us. The world has changed, and with it, the way we live. He sighed deeply. We now live in a world of technology, of modern conveniences, of globalization. Our children are no longer learning the old ways of the Kikuyu people in the same way we did. They are learning to live in a world that is different from the one we knew. Mzee's tone was gentle but firm. This new world has its benefits, but it also comes with risks. The traditions we hold dear are in danger of being forgotten, replaced by the ways of the modern world. But we must not allow this to happen. We must find a way to balance the old and the new, to ensure that our culture survives in this changing world. Mzee's voice became warm and urgent. The most important thing we can do now, child, is to teach the next generation. We must pass down the stories, the proverbs, the songs, and the wisdom that have been handed down to us by our ancestors. He looked at his grandchildren with deep affection. You are the ones who will carry our culture forward. You must learn the old ways, but also embrace the new. You must be the bridge between the past and the future, the link that connects us to our ancestors while guiding us into the future. Mzee's face softened with a proud smile. And I know you will do this. I see the fire of our ancestors in your eyes. I know that you will carry the torch of the Kikuyu people and ensure that our culture never fades. Mzee's voice became full of conviction as he spoke of the enduring legacy of the Kikuyu people. No matter what happens in the future, child, the Kikuyu will always remain. Our culture, our language, our traditions, they are as much a part of us as the blood that flows in our veins. He looked up at the stars, his eyes full of reverence. The Kikuyu people have survived centuries of change, of hardship, of colonization. We have fought for our land, for our freedom, and for our right to live as we choose. And we will continue to fight, not with weapons, but with our hearts, our minds, and our spirit. Mzee smiled warmly at his grandchildren. You are the future of the Kikuyu people. You are the ones who will carry our story forward. And though the world may change, our legacy will remain, for it is written in the land, in our language, and in the hearts of those who remember. Mzee's voice softened as he spoke of the role storytelling plays in preserving the Kikuyu culture. Storytelling, child, is the heart of our tradition. It is through stories that we pass down the wisdom of our ancestors, the lessons of the past, and the values that guide us. He leaned in, his voice full of warmth. Every story has meaning. Every tale carries a lesson, a warning, or a reminder of who we are. And it is through storytelling that we ensure our culture lives on. The stories you hear tonight will be the stories you tell to your children, and to their children, and so on. Mzee's eyes sparkled as he shared a final thought. Our culture will never fade as long as we continue to tell our stories. The stories of the Kikuyu are the stories of humanity, of strength, resilience, and hope. As the night deepened and the stars shone brightly above them, Mzee's voice became soft and reverent. The ancestors are always with us, child. They call to us, guiding us through the challenges of life, reminding us of who we are and where we come from. He looked around at the gathered family. When you feel lost, when you feel unsure, remember the call of the ancestors. They are always near, in the wind, in the trees, in the earth beneath our feet. Mzee smiled, his face full of peace. The ancestors have paved the way for us. And now it is our turn to walk that path, to honor them by living with courage, with dignity, and with love. As Mzee Wainaina continued to share his wisdom with his grandchildren, he imbued them with the spirit of their ancestors, the lessons of their people, and the resilience that had carried the Kikuyu through centuries of change and hardship. The story continues to unfold, bridging the past with the future, and passing on the mantle of cultural preservation to the next generation.